Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Trinity Parish Hall in this glorious parish, or as we like to term it, God's own parish. For those of you who don't know me, you're quite lucky. I'm John Muller. I'm one of the procurers in the parish, and my colleague Peter Williams will be hosting, or chairing, I should say, this evening's meeting. A special welcome goes to all the candidates who are here today and put their names forward to represent the parishes of Trinity, St John's and St Lawrence. And this is their opportunity to address you with their individual backgrounds, aims and aspirations, followed by your opportunity to ask them questions on those same points. A quick domestic issue: the toilets are at the rear of the parish hall and the emergency exits, should we need them. The main door you came in, the one to my right into the car park, or the one behind me into the office area, and there will be parish officials on hand to assist you if it's required. The procedure for this afternoon: we've set aside 1.5 hours for this hustings, as it's only fair to the candidates to have the opportunity to relax before they do it all again this evening. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to address the audience, and you will hear a bell towards the end of the 3 minutes to denote that 15 seconds remain. It's not a fire alarm, so please remain seated. When you ask a question, please start by stating your name and your parish. Only those people from one of the 3 parishes will be allowed to ask questions. We're on a tight time scale, so please keep your questions concise and to the point. We don't want any statements or grandstanding, which won't be allowed. Anyone who does, I will ask them to sit down and select another person. In true traditions of parish hustings, all candidates will be treated with courtesy and respect. Anyone disrupting the meeting will be asked to leave. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question, and once again there will be a bell at 15 seconds remaining. I will not revert back to the question once the candidates have finished, and my decision will be final on that point. Each question will be answered by the candidates in turn. So the first question will be answered by candidate 1, followed by the rest in order. Then the second question will be answered by candidate 2, and so on, to ensure a fair spread across all the candidates to allow them to consider their response. My assistant and timekeeper this afternoon is our parish secretary, Jane Sappe, and I'm supported by members of our superb honorary police who, believe me, you wouldn't want to trifle with. Finally, please switch off or put on silent your mobile phones. I think I've covered everything, unless the candidates have anything else they wish to add. And if not, then nothing remains but for me to call upon Mr. Hugh Raymond, who will set off the proceedings.
Good afternoon, everybody. I did pick the short straw. I'm not sure whether I picked the long straw, but can I first of all, I'm delighted that the politicians themselves have come to our delightful parish in Trinity. It's nice to see so many faces here, and it's also nice to see that we're having 2 hustings. But as you know, I've only ever lived in Trinity, so I have to make that absolutely clear, which I think I've done at the other hustings. Obviously, I have family within the parish, and my biggest issue within the parish was that, as you probably know, I was 18 years in the Honorary Police and ended up as the Honorary Police President for 4 years. By doing that, you tend to understand what the parishes are all about. And I'm not going to go into great detail about this, the way the voting is going and the way these events have occurred with 3 parishes to 1. But one has to say that if you're going to do it this year or this time, we're going to have to look after the 3 parishes. But I want to make absolutely sure that we get into some conversation to try and sort something out, because I think really, from what I've gathered from the other hustings, there are decisions that we have to make. But we are delighted to see people here from other parishes. I am absolutely delighted to maintain the fact that I am representing Trinity, but I will now be representing St. John's and St. Lawrence. That will take me away from what a lot of the work I've been doing, because I think now that our time is going to be spent, whoever gets in, dealing with the 3 parishes, with the honorary police and with the constables, because I think that that is going to make the decisions as to how best we deal with this situation. There will be a lot of questions asked, I'm sure, but as I said, I've basically worked in finance before I came back to Jersey, and which has helped me to understand exactly where we're going, and I have to confess, let's say I'm not too happy. And just to clear one thing which has been going through the papers, I am a member of the Jersey Alliance, but I'm standing on my own in the 3 parishes. The reason I've done that, because I was a member of a political party. I was a member of the political party in the UK, and it worked. But I don't think at the present time, if I can say, that Jersey is ready for party politics. And I think that we have to sit down and look as to where we're going. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Elaine Miller, and I'm standing as an independent candidate. I've also lived in Trinity for over 20 years, and I love its natural beauty and strong sense of community spirit, which is in common to all 3 parishes. I've really enjoyed meeting other parishioners over the last few weeks to listen to your concerns, and it's really good to see so many of you here today, so thank you for coming. I'm an advocate, and I've been a lawyer for 35 years. I have a track record of success in my career. I was a director at one of our biggest banks and a partner of one of our biggest law firms. For the last 7 years, I was the Viscount, and I was the first woman to be appointed to that office. These roles have helped me develop skills that I think are essential for a states member. I can make sense of complex information, I'm good at finding solutions to problems, and I know how to make sensible decisions. And that's what I'm offering you now. Someone who's capable, someone who can get things done, and who will work hard to deliver positive and effective outcomes for the 3 parishes and the island as a whole. I believe I can make a real and immediate contribution to the States Assembly. My manifesto focuses on 3 areas. First, business. Although we need to protect the financial services industry, the majority of businesses in Jersey employ fewer than 5 people. Small businesses are the lifeblood of every community, and we need to do more to support them by minimising red tape where we can. There are lots of businesses in Trinity, but we also have valuable enterprises like Acorn and Durrell, which is world famous for its conservation work and which contributes to our visitor economy. We must help them thrive. Second, health and social care. Our health professionals should have the resources and facilities they need to provide a good standard of health care. The new care model needs clear funding and more people, and it needs more input from the health professionals now. And we must now focus on building a new hospital that meets the island's needs. Third, housing. Clearly there is work to be done, and many parishioners have told me of their concerns with housing and the impact on their families from the housing shortages at the moment. We need to look for sensible ways to increase our housing stock. In Trinity, like the other parishes, has some good examples here with Maison Cabot and Le Grand Clos. We also need a fair deal for landlords and tenants, and we need to help to buy schemes that work for Jersey. But we must understand current and future demands for housing, and to do that, we need a properly considered strategy on population. Like many of you, I also want to see effective controls and more transparency on government spending. As Viscount, I was responsible for public funds and took that responsibility seriously. But I found that government systems do not result in value for money, and that has to change. There needs to be clear responsibility for public spending, and individuals must be held to account for management of budgets. I do hope you will give me one of your votes. I will not let you down. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here this afternoon to listen to us, and also thanks to my supporters and helpers across the 3 parishes of St Lawrence, Trinity and St John. In this district, District 3, which is often called the Super District, you have a clear choice. You have 3 alliance candidates, one of whom has been Chief Minister for 4 years. You also have 5 independents. Do you want more of the same, or do you want change? My name is Mary Venturini, and I am from St John, and I am also one of the independent candidates. My roots go back in St John's to the arrival of my grandmother in the 1920s. My mother lived in Roselle for the last 10 years of her life and loved the unique community there. I came back to St John's about 20 years ago. Before that, I established and ran the largest English language publishing company in Rome when I lived there with my husband, bringing up a young family. So I know about doing business in a very competitive and difficult environment. I'd also like to say I'm very pleased to see Sheila Clyde-Smith here today, because she just remembered that we had known each other since we were this high. So this really brings my roots home to me. My recent experience in Jersey has been analysing the new hospital project. This has brought me into contact with almost every other sphere of island life. We really need a new hospital, but I am against the one this alliance government is pushing through at the eye-watering cost of £804.5 million and rising. I will now go through a list of the other crises that there are in the island, and notice that I call them crises, and most of them have their roots in the last 4 years of government. Healthcare crisis. This is not only to do with the new hospital, but much more to do with the conditions that doctors and nurses have to cope with, having to work in a very hostile environment. Employment crisis. All sectors, healthcare, hospitality, building, finance, farming, are finding it difficult to get staff right now. One of the reasons for this is the housing crisis. Young people are finding it impossible to find decent rental accommodation, or to even think about buying a house. We are going to have to re-examine the whole housing chain, from substandard rental properties to the huge multi-million houses left empty for long periods. The agricultural crisis. One can't be in Trinity without mentioning agriculture. Plenty of efforts are being made in regenerative farming and different ways of farming, and many of the farmers belong to LEAF. I will tell you more about LEAF in due course. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and thank you to the Constable and parishioners of Trinity for allowing us to hold our hustings here this afternoon. My name is Andy Howell, and I'm standing as an independent candidate for Deputy for the new District 3, and I would really appreciate your vote on June the 22nd. I feel very fortunate to have lived in Jersey for the last 40 years. I know this doesn't mean that I qualify as a Jersey bean, but nevertheless, I regard Jersey as my home. We've brought up our family here, and I really care about Jersey and all aspects of island life: people, environment, traditions. I'm standing for election because I think we need a fresh start. We need new states members, and I would love to be one of them. I want to be part of a states assembly that listens to islanders and is open, transparent, and accountable. I will work collaboratively and with integrity to make sensible and financially sound decisions, ensuring that we do not waste taxpayers' money and that we live within our means. I don't think the island should be in debt. I'd like to address the cost of housing. As a retired dentist and wife of a GP, I am passionate about making positive change within our healthcare system, reducing bureaucracy. We need a new hospital, but it should not cost £804.5 million. It needs to be properly future-proofed and provide all the services and facilities that we need. Current plans need to be revisited because too much is missing. Islanders need certainty as to where they will receive their care. But it's not all about the building, it's more about the staff. We need to be able to attract and retain our wonderful frontline staff. We need to understand why morale is low by listening to them and making changes accordingly. They need to be cherished and empowered to do their jobs. Excellent patient care, coupled with kindness and compassion, has to be the number one priority. So as the electorate, you have to decide, do you wish to continue with the present government? Do you think things have been well managed over the last 4 years? Or do you want change? I think we need positive change and a different way forward for Jersey. I believe everyone matters. I'm approachable, hardworking, and will value your input. I think that together we can put Islanders at the heart of decision making. But the only way I can make a difference is if I get elected on June the 22nd. So if you live in St John or St Lawrence or Trinity, please vote for me, Andy Howell. I would love to be your deputy. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Hilary Jean, and I would love the opportunity to work for you to make Jersey a fairer, more inclusive and sustainable place to live. If elected, I will use my passion, experience and influence to make a real difference. Making a difference is what drives me, and it's why I'm standing as an independent candidate. I grew up in Zion and became interested in politics through my family, who taught me about the importance of giving back to our community, of making impact and difference for good, of getting things done with strong work ethics, and how to participate in a good debate that is respectful of everyone's opinion, especially the importance of listening. This inspired me to follow the path that I've been on for the last 20 years, working with and influencing international organisations and their member governments, including the United Nations, the World Bank and the European Union. I've worked for Oxfam and the Fair Trade Network, and now through my own business, encourage countries to reduce inequality, protect the environment and create a sustainable future. I've monitored, scrutinised and influenced the European Union's budget, how the World Bank spends its funds, as well as influence trade, climate change, agriculture and international development policies. Giving my time locally, I'm Deputy Chair of Jersey's adult homeless charity, JAF, an advisor to the Jersey Community Foundation, elected member of St John's Committee Rural, influencing the island's bridging plan, and editor of St John's Parish magazine. Using this experience and knowledge while working collaboratively and building consensus, I believe I can make an impact. Policies must be values-led, evidence-based, and focus on our future for our younger generation. We must address and improve the situation of housing in both the private and rental markets to stem the cost of living crisis. I want to see a strong, diverse economy that works for all, which supports small businesses, innovation, and pushes us to be a sustainable finance jurisdiction. As a mum of two, I know firsthand how vital it is that we devise and implement an education framework that focuses on problem solving, critical thinking, building confidence and empathy, and reducing excessive testing. Protecting our environment is high on my agenda. We must do more to protect our island and play a role in achieving global goals. This includes accessible, affordable, healthy food from farmers that are valued. I will prioritise delivering accessible primary health care and a new hospital. And I will work for a diverse and inclusive society that addresses the gender pay gap, supports parents' return to work, and further adoption of the living wage. I want to support and preserve parish life as it enhances our community. Though I am unhappy with this new arrangement, I will strive to ensure the constituency's 4 deputies and 3 constables work together to establish a space for constructive, collaborative exchange of ideas. I promise to listen to you and be your voice. I'm accessible, approachable, constructive, and I will collaborate with all states members to develop impactful policies and get things done. Please consider voting for me to deliver a fresh approach to politics. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Those who don't know me, I'm John Lafondre, and it was 16 and a half years ago that I was first elected to the Assembly. And it's been a privilege to serve as Deputy initially for St Lawrence, as Senator and as Chief Minister. Now, the last few years have been unprecedented, with Brexit, with COVID, and now the impact of Ukraine. And it has taken calm, tough decision-making, resilience, experience and total commitment to lead the government through this time. Now, while some people sadly have suffered loss and others still face difficulties, Jersey has emerged in a strong position. We have protected lives and livelihoods. We supported businesses with a whole range of packages and kept the schools open longer than most other places. Our vaccination programme, border testing and contact tracing were superb, and the innovative £100 spend local scheme, which I initiated, was very popular and a global first. Despite the challenges, our finances are sound, with higher reserves and a £59 million surplus for 2021. I've used my breadth of political and professional experience to unblock and launch complex projects for the long-term benefit of islanders. And just to give one example, which is very recently I concluded 2.5 years of work that will ultimately save us around £3 billion. Other situations need swift solutions. On day one as Chief Minister, I was informed of a lawsuit of £200 million with more to come. What could have been done had not been done. We put law changes in place, and in the first 6 months, we saved £40 million. And alongside the long hours worked on the pandemic, we invested considerably to start to improve health, education, sport, culture, arts, and mental health. Much has been funded by making savings, now at around £70 million a year. Work has actually started on Fort Regent. The new tech fund is important for the digital economy, and plans in progress will deliver thousands of homes over the next few years. So there is hope, but it requires continued focus and persistence. To cope with the cost of living crisis, initial payments were made 2 months ago now, in April, to help the vulnerable. This is in addition to new support for people who do struggle, including with GP fees and dentistry costs. And to reassure you, even during the elections, work carries on so that the next government can act quickly in these times. And to finally get planning permission for our new hospital is significant. It is a large sum of money, no question, but it is funded responsibly and it is affordable. It is ready to go, and in my view, it does need to happen. We live in an increasingly complex and rapidly changing world. My team has taken long-term decisions to secure a positive future for Jersey. Whilst recovering from COVID, we still face global issues, and it will take experienced politicians as well as new faces to hit the ground running. I hope you recognise the value of my experience and continue to Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Thank you, John, Jane, the Honorary Police, for giving up their time to enable this one of 2 hustings today to happen. My name's Kirsten Morrell, and I've been serving in the States Assembly for the past 4 years as Deputy for St Lawrence. During that time, I think I've shown myself to be someone who stands up for people, who speaks out, who asks questions that need to be asked of government, questions that for many years, and it's one of the reasons why I stood, I could hear both the media and other politicians were ignoring. I tried to get to the heart of the matter, to understand, to show that we have a government that is accountable to us. Now, I stand here as someone who, for 4 years, has learnt, has built relations, and is ready to go. I understand the workings of government. I understand the workings of the States Assembly. But more than anything, I come from a position where I understand and believe that Jersey is a truly wonderful place. That's where I start from, and that's what I want to continue. I was born in the 1970s. I was lucky enough to grow up through the 80s and 90s. They were massively successful years for Jersey. But I fear that we're squandering them. I benefited from a wonderful education. It's an education that sent me abroad and brought me back home. But today I am the only one of 8 cousins who's still left in the island. That really worries me, because without young people, without people, all my cousins have degrees, but they've all left Jersey. And I know we're not the only family like that. So I want to concentrate on trying to deal with the issues of today. They are issues such as the cost of living, the rising cost of healthcare, the rising cost of housing, managing healthcare that we can all access. There are staff shortages in our businesses, and there is red tape which makes it really difficult to start a small business. These are things that I want to grapple with because we need to deal with them now. But at the same time, and the work I've been doing in the past year as Assistant Minister for Culture, Arts and Heritage, and also for the rural economy, that's farming, and the marine economies, the work I've been doing there is about trying to create career paths for children and for young people. Because if they don't see their future here, that my family will just be one example among many hundreds where the young people leave this island. And we need young people because every small community needs people to stay here and build that island for us. Those are the big pathways that I want to create. Those are the two things that I want to do. It's dealing with today's challenges and it's building that sustainable and prosperous future for us all. Now, one thing that has really struck me over the past 4 years is the distance that has been created between government and islanders. As a States member over the past 4 years, I've been involved in the parish, and I will continue to do that across the 3 parishes, because it's by listening to you that I'm able to best work for you. And I really hope you give me the chance to continue that work. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm so sorry, I keep writing those really nice speeches and then completely disregarding them. I was just asked a question, or reminded, that 4 years ago I said, well, I'll do 1 term if I get elected, and then I'll be happy, I'll have done my service for the island, and that would be fine. What I didn't know was just how much work I was getting into. John here decided to take the list of everything that needed doing in Jersey and just go through it. Just tackle every single item, one by one, right now, when we could. And his government started all the generational projects that have been left aside in Jersey for so long. Government offices, it sounds silly, but we needed a large office for the government to actually save money, because we spend 10 million a year in rent. It's ridiculous for a government that owns quite a bit of real estate to actually have to rent offices. This needed to be done. Fort Regent needed to be sorted, but nobody wants to do it because it takes 10 years, and you start spending money, and you never get the chance to cut the ribbon in front of the camera. And there's so many others. The sports and community facilities, they need to be redone all around the island. It's a 15 years project, 10 sites. Who was going to start this, knowing that maybe you'll do 1 building in the 4 years, and again, somebody else would get their face in the front page of the JEP 15 years from now? Well, we started all this, we did all this, and I ended up member of 2 ministries and 20 boards, panels, and committees working on all these things. And of course, working on these generational projects that we just about started. And I really like to be able to continue that. And that's why I'm here again. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I need to make people understand what the alliance is. We chose the name carefully, saying it's an alliance, it's not a party, it's a group, it's not a party. It's an alliance of people who think the same way and who can work together. And we needed to do it. We were forced to do it because of the electoral reform. We didn't want it. We didn't want this change. We didn't want parishes, randomly agglomerated together. We didn't want that. We didn't want senators to disappear. We think they were quite important. And the only reason we created the alliance was to work in this new environment and try to have a government that would work with these sorts of elections. So that's why we created it. It's not a party, it is an alliance. And we were forced to do it by the idiotic reform that was brought by the Assembly. Thank you.
Yes, I think he is indeed. Okay, now for question time. I think Chris Bray is going to pass the mic around, I believe. Gentleman at the back will. And in the true spirit, we have our very first question at the front. Chris, please. Please state your name and your parish, please.
Thank you. Kerry Twiston-Davis, St Lawrence. Address all the candidates. Jersey State spends a lot of time and hot air stating that they're supporting green and sustainable projects, yet in truth, unlike other administrations who subsidise zero rate the cost. Jersey charges GST. It indeed requires planning permission and charges per solar panel, for example, or indeed recently has put an extra tax on electric cars. How can each candidate justify the support we're supposed to have for green when they actually are encouraging the exact opposite?
Can we start with you, Randy, please?
It's a very good question to start with. I wish we had more time than a minute, but I totally agree with what you're stating. I think one of the biggest issues that we have, and I think you'll find from most people across the table, that we're not as hard as we think we are. I've been involved in some conversations that has been very difficult to move forward because the system has been placed there that we have to break down. And I found it very awkward, and especially when you go to something that, oh, well, we've tried it before, or we've done it before, you suddenly get blocked. But we've got to look at it. We've got to look at the whole structure of government, and dare I say it, we've got to be the brave people that go out and try and do it. What we're not doing is that we're not taking on the civil servants as we should be. There's far too many people coming in which we're not collecting or not getting enough information and trying to find out what they're doing. And we've got to spend our time now looking at where Jersey's going, because there is, what I say, a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, I agree. One of the things that I found odd from the carbon neutral plan was there was proposals to support anybody who wished to buy an electric car or an electric bike, regardless of means. And it seems to me that we shouldn't be subsidising people who can well afford to buy electric cars. And if we really are committed to that, we should be making sure that we support people who perhaps don't have that money to get into green technologies such as transport. Transport's an important one. One of the things I've heard loudly and clearly in Trinity is the need for a better bus service. Reduced road traffic, that's common in all three parishes. People want to see less speeding, less traffic and better buses. But I think from Jersey, we're a small island and there are lots of things we could be doing, and I think we should be really focusing on what we can do well. Sustainable travel, sustainable finance. We should be looking to our finance industry to promote green initiatives, to be sustainable themselves, the way they operate their businesses. Sustainable tourism, we're a small island, we could make something out marketing ourselves as green tourism. So.
I would entirely agree with you about the planning restrictions on solar. It is something that I have been looking into. I am not allowed to put solar on my roof. Trinity Manor Farm has not yet got permission to put solar panels on its cowshed, which seems to me absolutely extraordinary. I do have an electric car. They are not the real answer, although they go well in Jersey, but they don't go in the UK or in Europe. I would like to see at least some sort of research into hydrogen, and I think that the Liberty bus service should be starting on that. We have got to start somewhere. We're not allowed to put windmills up in our gardens because they make a noise, and we've rejected tidal power. We are not going in the right direction, and we should start moving forward. This is a crisis.
I agree with Kerry Twiston-Davies. We should be allowed to put solar panels on without having to get planning permission, because it would be really helpful. But we can't, and that's one thing we should do. I think it's great that bus passes have now been introduced for children under 19. They pay £20 for the year, and that means they can use the buses. I recommend my electric bike for anybody who feels like cycling, because that's a really good way of getting around. But I think generally as an economy, I think we should be concentrating more on the circular economy, so that involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, recycling. I think we're lucky we've got Durrell, we've got Acorn, where it's a really good recycling, and we've got parish recycling. And I think the government needs to think about all the things that we can do for a greener way of life, because it's really important. Thank you.
I completely agree with your analysis. I think that there needs to be more coherence between all the decisions that are made in the government. So you have commitments to be a more carbon neutral island, to be more green, support environment, but yet on the other hand, there is not enough support and funding put into that, or there is restrictions, from planning. And so the bus system is not supporting an alternative transport. We need to have a more sustainable finance jurisdiction to be able to also have a positive impact globally. So there are so many things that can then stem from those one commitments that aren't working, because you have so many different departments that are actually making different rules instead of actually coming together and being supportive of those strong commitments that will never be reached if we don't all work together and the government doesn't work together to get to meet those commitments.
I think I heard part of it at the beginning by the fact we charge GST on solar panels about zero rating and things. Just to be clear, particularly as a chartered accountant and also as in Treasury, after the GST had been agreed, but when it was being implemented, and the basic rule is keep it low, broad, simple, because it just keeps everything consistent. It really does keep the admin costs down, and as a separate jurisdiction, you don't want to run into the arguments around is a Jaffa cake, a cake or a biscuit, which is what the UK and Europe go through. And believe it or not, I'm sure solar panels will come under that. However, climate emergency, carbon neutral roadmap, etc., will therefore require grant systems to essentially deal with that, which can therefore be targeted to make sure that essentially those who are seriously able to afford it, are encouraged but don't necessarily benefit to the same level as people who really need the incentive.
15.
Things like hopper bus services, I actually funded the initiative out of my Chief Minister's budget. They are on island. They should be starting within days as a trial for the next 3 years. And things like, I'm going to say financial services industry and the ESG initiatives that they are running should help us punch above our weight globally.
Thank you. A really good question. It's dealing with environmental change is really difficult for government because it requires massive cultural and behavioural change on the part of all of us. So, for instance, trying to get us out of our cars is just not easy when day in, day out for years, after year, we've been jumping in our cars and driving to town. So I think you're absolutely right. GST is actually one of the mechanisms we can use. Now, Treasury is wedded to this idea that GST has to be flat and kept down, simple. But the trouble is, I ask myself, when I see massive cars with huge engines driving past, cars which are not suitable for the roads in this island, I ask myself, how are you going to stop people buying those cars when effectively they're priced the same as more environmentally friendly cars?
15.
GST is one of the ways you do that. You can charge much higher rates on those unsuitable vehicles and much lower rates on the vehicles which you want to be used in the roads. That's just part of the answer. 1 minute isn't enough, but I'd love to speak to you more about it. Thank you.
Funnily enough, I just looked at the carbon neutral roadmap that we voted at the very last sitting of the Assembly. And it doesn't seem that anybody's read it. And I'm very surprised. First thing, very quickly, GST is not VAT. You have the choice of 5% on everything or 20% on some and different rates on the others. VAT is massively difficult to administer. It's massively difficult to understand. And basically, if you try it, you're going to be in court for 50 years arguing about Jaffa cakes. So Jersey decided that it would be GST and it's on everything. Solar panels are permitted development. You don't need a planning application, except if you're in a listed building, because they look special. They don't look like slate. Or if you're on the path of the airport, because we have to make sure that you don't dazzle planes landing, which is rather important. So those things are actually not true problems.
Can I reply to that?
We don't have time. Sorry, we don't have time. Thank you. Next question. Over the far right-hand side. Thank you.
It has to be done now.
Yes, it is.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Funk. I have been a resident of Trinity for the past 35 years. Despite being an American, I am allowed to vote. I would like to ask our candidates what their views are on our hospital project. And I ask this because the last Assembly voted a budget of £804 million to build a hospital at Overdale. We are now suffering inflation at a rate in excess of 10%, and those costs are going to rise. Our last assembly voted to raise a debt of £756 million to pay for the hospital. They expected to pay an interest rate of 2.5%. The government has just raised £500 million at an interest rate of 3%, and interest rates are rising. The government expected to invest the £756 million in the Strategic Investment Fund and to earn no less than 4.6% on that investment. At the moment, the financial markets are weak. Our investment fund is not earning anywhere near that amount of money. I would ask our candidates, are you in favor, if elected, of a review of our hospital project, or are you in favor of continuing as planned? Thank you.
That's me. Thank you very much. That's also a very challenging question. I have to say I don't really understand the numbers and the financing and how the hospital's supposed to be financed, but it seems to me that 804 million is far, far too much. It's grandiose. I think I favour a degree of review to see what we provide at Overdale. We do have planning permission, and so much money has been spent. I find it very difficult. I think we can't keep digging holes and filling them in again. I think we do need to take the advantages that we have from the Overdale site, but I do think we have to review what's provided there. And I think we may need an acute provision in the centre of town. It doesn't make sense not to have accident and emergency in the centre of town. I think we've been, to a degree, misled. I don't think senior specialists will come to Jersey just because we have a lovely hospital. They will come if the work's here. I think we need to focus on providing services that affect most of the population and do their services well, and help people who need specialist treatment to go to specialist centres, either in the UK or France.
I am totally in favour of a review of the costs. The costs are absolutely astronomical. I would also be in favour of a review of the design. Not the site itself, that has been decided, and that is very clear. But we could have a much better design for this hospital. It does not have to cut into a hill. It does not have to destroy the whole community from Tower Road down to the People's Park. There are lots of alternatives. I could go on about this for a very long time because I have walked up that site for 30 days non-stop. In fact, more than that. I know a lot about it. If anyone would like to come on a walk with me to see what an absurdity that hospital is, I am still open to walking.
I too have been working very hard looking at the plans for this future hospital, and we should not be spending £804.5 million on it. The government plan, the way they were going to pay for it, will not work anymore. It wasn't going to work to start with. It certainly won't work now. What I'm most worried about, though, is what is not in this hospital. We're only going to have 175 overnight beds. There's no physiotherapy department, no occupational therapy department, nowhere to store occupational therapy equipment, no hydrotherapy pool, no rehabilitation ward. They're going to knock down the Westmount building, which houses the Samurai ward, and we haven't got anything. There's nowhere for the oral surgeon to work. There aren't proper offices for our consultants. It's not all it is cracked up to be if you look at the plans. The functional brief has let us down. Thank you, and I really think we need to review it.
We need a new hospital, but I think it is has far too much money, and the plans are inadequate, as we've heard, because it's only an acute hospital, and we haven't yet heard where all the other departments are going to be placed. And that is linked to the Jersey Care model, which also is not being funded properly. So we need to have apparently so much more staff to come to Jersey to be able to support not only in the hospital, but also carers in the community. These are not looked, it seems, in a system as a whole. It seems to be put in different departments, and their costs, therefore, are growing both for a building, for being able to attract staff. It's not working, and I think the health system as a whole needs to be re-looked at.
Mr. Funk, no. It's a short answer. I unequivocally support the hospital project. Anyone who actually says they want to revisit, stop it, redesign it, just have a quick evaluation, basically you're saying you want to stop it for 3 years. Okay? That's the reality. That is not, unless, put it this way, I don't think anyone here is a professional architect or professional hospital developer. That is not going to reduce the costs. I can tell you one thing. I walked into a room and the chap we'd brought in to deal with the consultants, which hadn't been done previously, said, Chief Minister, you were lucky you didn't get the last scheme because it would have been out of date within 4 to 5 years. It also didn't include mental health. So, yeah, you might argue about the site. A decision has been made. Let's stick with it. Let's get on with the blooming thing. And if you think actually recruiting, retaining new medical staff is going to be assisted by cancelling the project, which is effectively what you're saying, think again. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I know you've worked hard over years trying to help Jersey gain its a hospital which works. I say it quite simply in my manifesto. I am open to review. I'm open to recosting, but that work cannot stop the hospital timeline because we're looking at between 80 and 100 million pounds a year in inflation. That's the trouble. We're looking at 10%. We were speaking to the construction council this morning, and you're looking at 8 to 10% building cost inflation right now. So any delay is going to cost us hundreds of millions more. That's the situation we're in. Now, I said when we cancelled the Gloucester Street site, which this council ministers wanted to do, that was 460 million. And I stood in the States and I said, if we do this, it will cost more and it will take longer. That's exactly what's happening. So we can't go back down that road of costing more and taking longer. So any review, which I would support if it's done quickly, doesn't take 3 years, absolutely, because that will be 240 million in extra costs. So yes, I'm looking for that scope, but we have to crack on.
£800 million is a lot of money, but that's what it costs. There is no other way if you want a hospital. And we absolutely, desperately need a hospital. The one in town, if it was inspected by the UK now, would probably be closed. That's as bad as it's getting. So we absolutely, desperately need a hospital. And Deputy Morel was absolutely right. Every time we stop it, the price goes up by 200 million. If we'd done it 12 years ago, when the first project was proposed, the project was probably 80% right. It was not perfect, it was 80% right. But it would have cost 400 million. Then we had another project which was worse, which was 500 or 600. 50. And now we have the last one, and it's 800. If we stop and go again, it will be it will be 1 billion. But also, nobody will want to do it for us. Jersey is now recognized as a political risk. We're in the same bag as Zimbabwe.
Thank you. Another... Oh, sorry, Hugh. I beg your pardon. I nearly forgot you.
Thank you. So, where do you want me to start, Peter? I think I wouldn't have said I think there should be a review if I hadn't taken up the post of what, and I'm saying this loud and clear now, what the existing hospital is costing to run at the present time. The cost of it is going through the roof. And I think that you've got to realise that if we don't make decisions quickly, that is going to come into play more than often. It seems to me that the vast majority of people have forgotten that we have to run a hospital. I see the figures, I see the people that we're employing, and I have to confess, take inflation, taking interest rates, and being in finance a little, and looking at the accounts, and I've got the broad brush view of the accounts of running the existing hospital, we really have to make decisions very quickly. And the new people that move in must make the hospital its first priority, because I think we're not going to, otherwise it just ends up waffling and we end up paying a lot more money. But we've really got to make the hospital the most important factor in the next review of our ministers.
Thank you. Another question, please. The lady just at the end there, Chris, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Susan McGarry and I'm a resident of St Lawrence. My question to the candidates is, what are your views on assisted dying?
Mary, thank you.
I am the first one to answer this. I think that this is a very, very personal question. I have seen people who have wanted to die, and I have seen people who do not want to die. I think you cannot make a decision on this personally unless you have been in the situation. In theory, of course, assisted dying is a good idea because nobody wants to see anybody in pain. And I would not like anybody to have to be in pain, and I have been told that it is not necessary to be in pain these days. My feeling is that every person has to make that own decision for themselves, and they have to make it when they're in a right and sane frame of mind. I would be very hesitant to vote in favour of assisted dying.
Thank you.
I think this is a really, really difficult question. I can understand if I had motor neurone disease and I knew that I was going to end up without being able to swallow, without any faculties, that I might be tempted, but I think I'm too much of a coward. I think we would have to have very, very good safeguards if we went down this road. I want to support the very good palliative care that we have at the moment. And I think we would have to have terribly good safeguards to go ahead, and I would be reticent about wanting to vote in favour of assisted dying. I think it's such a hard decision, and it's for every individual, but it's a very big thing for the island to take on, I think, and we have to think very, very hard about it. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think it is a very personal decision to make, and it's something that I would like to have that choice. So I would be supportive of it, but with very, very strong safeguarding. And luckily, I've lived in Belgium and the Netherlands for the last 20 years, so we have examples from around the world that we can draw on and build really strong safeguarding into any system. We're not the first. And therefore, we really can make sure that we really have got it so that there's no abuse of the system, and that we really make sure that it is that person's own personal choice when they want to take that or not, but put it within a wider strategy of end-of-life care. So enhance our palliative care, enhance pain relief, and make sure that it really is the last resort as a choice for that person.
Thank you. John?
It's the most emotive, difficult and respectful debate I've ever experienced in my 16 and a half years in the Assembly. You need to ensure that everyone feels valued. I think the biggest concern, as we will hear and have heard already, is that there are full and proper safeguards in place. Therefore, if I'm satisfied that those safeguards are in place, then I would presently be in favour. I would say, I'm sure like a number of us in the Assembly, I certainly discussed it with elderly relatives in my family, and not all, but the majority were in favour, which obviously does influence your judgment. But I think it's likely that unless you're in the case, it's the case that unless you're in the position facing the issue, it is very difficult to pass judgment on those who don't want it and those who do. As I said, for me at the moment, if the safeguards in place, I would probably continue to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really challenging question. It's the most challenging question that I had to face when I was in the States over the past 4 years. In short, for me personally, I like to think that I would be able to have a choice. But this is where it comes, are you a States member or are you not? Because as a States member, I'm not talking about me personally. I'm talking about the island as a whole. And I found it very difficult. And so normally there are 2 stages to a States debate. The first, and then the legislation comes forward and you pass it or you don't. I brought an amendment to make sure that there's going to be a 3rd debate. So we look at all the legislation, all the policies and safeguards before we go ahead with this. The really interesting question is why haven't we done more to invest in palliative care? Why have we gone straight for assisted dying rather than saying, actually, we're probably not getting palliative care or investing as much in that area as we could? So I think as well as we will debate assisted dying twice more in the next 4 years, but beyond that, we should be focused much more on palliative care. Thank you.
Well, this is one of the projects that I would like to follow on if I'm elected again. I presented this to the Assembly very recently, and we had an extraordinary debate, very, very deep thought. And of course, it's all about the safeguards. We all agree the majority in the Assembly agree that it should be an option, but of course the safeguards are paramount. And it's something that I would really, really like to work on in the next term.
Just following on from that, I very much agree with what the statement was last made. I think the most important thing, the question that was put to all of us, was it what would you do, or what would the family do, what would the lawyers do? It's such mixed with so many different issues that you have to make sure that everything is right. And you also, which sometimes people do forget, you also have to include religion, which I noticed on quite a few of the debates. There has been very few asking of what the religious people have said. It was quite amazing. It was more about, you know, the family situation, and is it your view? What would you do if you were in that position? So I think that the Assembly has to, here we go again, the Assembly has to look at the ways forward of looking at this, because it's not going to go away, and I think people are going to have to make decisions, and they are going to have to hard decisions. Thank you.
Mrs McGarry, I had the benefit of a conversation with you on this yesterday, and you made a number of very meaningful points, and I've been thinking about it a lot since then. I do accept it's a very controversial decision. There are, as Hugh said, there are a number of faith issues that may not have been addressed, and people of faith have to be able to follow their faith. We have to not have a position where doctors are being pushed into treatment that they don't want to do. I agree with you also that we need better palliative care. So this is my lawyer's head talking. My heart, though, says that if it was me, I would like to be able to make the choice. I think it has to be a personal choice. We have to understand that pain does impact the balance of your mind. I believe pain impacts the balance of your mind. But I spent my entire life from the age of 7 or 8 with my dad telling me he didn't want to be kept alive in a machine and he had to be switched off. So from a very young child, I knew that I would face the decision of that with my dad. We didn't have to make the decision, but it has to be available, I think. Thank you.
Is that it? Yeah. Next question, please. On this side of the room this time, Chris. Sorry, gentleman at the back.
Thank you. Michael Hickey from Trinity. Right across the whole island strata, from education, health, service industry, hospitality, there's a recruiting crisis. And I personally think it's due to the fact that the exorbitant rents that are charged in Jersey and the lack of facilities, you know, for people to rent. And I want you, if possible, link that into, you know, what our young children, the problems they have also in finding housing and accommodation. So I'd like to hear what the candidates would do about solving the recruiting crisis, and as a loaded, not loaded, but it's if you have time, in 1 minute also, what are you going to do about housing for our younger generation?
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for that question. I think we've got to try to encourage all our young people to want to stay on the island if they'd like to, and we need to train them for jobs that are going to become available. But I know it's really, really difficult because it's so expensive to live over here. So it's a terribly difficult question. For renting is so expensive. I think lots of mums and dads have their children with them for much longer now than they used to, because that's the only way that they can manage to survive on the income that they get, because it's so expensive to rent and to buy. So we just got to try to support. I think the Trinity scheme's really excellent, and I think, you know, we have to, perhaps the government has to help, and parishes help young people to support them to stay. Thank you.
There's a recruitment crisis and a housing crisis for youngsters because of the cost of living and because of that, especially because of housing. I think it's really important that we look at expanding socially rented homes, and that there isn't that link with the private sector. I think at the moment it's 80%, but we need to stop that market rate link, because that is really driving up the price of rents for the social rented. We also need to, I think, put more deposit schemes for youngsters to be able to even start to rent. As Deputy Chair of JAF, which is a homelessness charity for youngsters 18 to 25, to even get them onto being able to rent is really, really difficult, because they don't have the money to be able to put into that deposit. So I think a deposit scheme is absolutely crucial. But also we need to widen that to home owning, to be able to have more assisted purchase homes for not only young families, but widen that as well to be able to help those individuals and youngsters to be able to own a home as well.
Yes, a lot to get in 1 minute. Bear in mind that the last 2.25 years, COVID sucked out an awful lot of the things that we did want to address. Housing and skills is obviously one of them, coupled with the joys of Brexit, and actually COVID and the pandemic has had a huge influence, as well as has already been alluded to, the Ukraine and the cost of living crisis. In terms of recruitment side, part of it is grow your own. That is about training programs, it's about skills and all that sort of stuff. We were at the Construction Council earlier today. They were talking about how many locals they are doing through partnership with Skills Jersey and Highlands, and they were talking quite significant numbers. That is a longer term thing. Government has restarted an apprenticeship scheme. I was just looking for the numbers. I've got 30 to 40 in my head initially and wanted to build on that. In terms of housing, it's about getting the sites in the pipeline. That's what we have done. So waterfront should be 1,000 homes, ports 500 to 1,000, brownfield sites, including this advice here on the Markles being demolished, saves us money, releases brownfield sites. On top of that, you then get affordable housing schemes in place. It will take some time, but it's doable.
I was thinking 2 o'clock start.
Thank you, sir. The whole of the Western world has a recruitment crisis. That's the truth. After COVID, people decided to stop working. And so Jersey is not alone, but Jersey's crisis is more acute because of the cost of housing over here. We need to help businesses accommodate those people. Sadly, staff accommodation in many businesses has been sold off. So now we need to help them to build small areas of staff accommodation to enable them to recruit people on a short-term basis. Because again, this cannot be bringing more people here to increase the population. As far as actually local people are concerned, it just astounds me. The government itself doesn't have proper training programs for people coming through. We need a government which says we want young people working in our own government. And so that will then be reflected not just in government, but in finance, in construction, in hotels, in farming. This is the work I've been trying to do in the areas that I've had responsibility for. And we need to tell young people, we want you to stay here, and we will help you stay here.
Yes, the key to recruitment actually is housing. We offer good salaries and a fantastic place to live in, but you still need to have a home. We launched, when I was talking about generational projects, we launched the largest building campaign in Jersey's history, 5,000 homes. Andium will build 3,000 social homes in the next 7 years. 3,000, that's 50% of their stock. And that's all social housing, that's all very affordable housing. The rest of the government projects are 2,000 homes, which will also be assisted buying. And affordable in that vein. And of course, there are lots of private developments happening at the same time.
15.
So this is going to be one of the projects that needs to be followed in the next government. It's launched, it's ready to go. It has started in some instances, but it needs a lot of work.
I think you have to pull everything together, and knowing your profession previously, I think it has to start with the children at school, that, you know, where are you going, what are you going to do? And some, I think, has happened in the past, that the people have always needed a degree or something like that to move forward, but people don't need those qualifications now. They need people to deal with just building walls and all the old sort of building structures that we're putting up, plumbers, electricians. I think we've gone down too far the route that everybody must have a degree to be able to do something. I think if you have an ability to do something, it should come from, as I said, your ex-profession. It has to start in schools,
15.
and it has to start with the teachers making sure that they're putting across to everybody, look, you can get a very good income. I know rents are at the moment, and we've got to look at that, but we've got to make sure that we pull everything together from when they start secondary school after leaving junior school. Thank you.
Well, I was also going to make the point that Kirsten made about recruitment being a crisis more widely than Jersey. Jersey does have the difficulty with housing. Part of that problem will be in supply. And while we have heard that Andium are tasked to build more housing, Andium said this morning at the Construction Council, we heard this phrase a lot this morning about being shovel-ready, and they said that to get to a new development to be shovel-ready took 2 years, and about a third of that was planning. A lot of the difficulties we have in delays in planning processes, getting developments ready to go. So we need to look at building new houses, giving children hope for the future, making sure there are jobs for them. The government has started off some major initiatives in terms of apprenticeships within the public service, internships within the public service. Other industries are looking at their own training programmes, whether that's hospitality, construction, financial services. There's, you know, they train their own people. But I think planning is a big part of that, making it more effective to get more homes ready.
I was interested to hear that we can't bring more people in. We are about to bring 1,000 more people in to build the new hospital. Where are they going to live? But there are two problems here. One is those who do qualify for affordable housing, and there are those who don't. Those who do qualify for affordable housing have to go through enormous loopholes, bureaucratic loopholes, even to get on the list. If they get on the list, then they have to wait for a very long time. Those who don't qualify are pretty much out of the market. And I have heard so many people, very well qualified, earning quite a lot of money, saying that they're going to pack up and go back to the UK. I've had 2 last night, come up to me after the Hustings and say, we put our house on the market. This is a tragedy, and we have got to examine it from the bottom up, and especially the multi-million-pound houses that are empty.
Thank you. Another question. Gentleman at the front here, Chris, please.
Thank you. My name is Christopher Harris. I'm an elector from St Lawrence, and I have 2 important concerns or issues in my mind as I determine how to vote. One is the environment, the preservation of the natural beauty of this island, and the other is ordinary people and the high cost of housing. And could I ask each candidate to state specifically one thing that they would do under each head to make things better for Jersey? One thing that they would do to improve the natural beauty, to protect our environment, and one thing that they would do to reduce the cost of housing for ordinary people. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Hilary.
So on the environment, there's lots I would like to say, but I think we need to look at the network of marine protected areas. So actually looking beyond Jersey, you know, the environment on the land, there's lots of things we could do, but actually look at our marine. It's really special. We are an island. So I think that that would be my number one, is to make sure that a marine protected area is put through as quickly as possible. On ordinary people and the cost of housing, that is actually a very complicated question to be able to answer, and as we've already said a few things about that. But for me, the biggest thing is to make sure that when we are building, to make it affordable, we have to have a definition of affordability. So I think that really is. And the second is to be able to make sure that we build, whatever we're building, we've heard that's got lots in the pipeline, that there is as cost effective as possible, there is environmentally sound as possible, and climate resilient, because to make them as efficient as possible will help the cost and also the environment.
Mr. Harris. You will know I supported Plemmel many years ago. I'm not going to give you one answer, that I'll give you three. I've also actually, we trialled the closure, you may not have been supportive of it, I don't know. It was me that trialled the closure of Waterworks Valley in the 2020, in the summer, on the weekend, which was really about changing our mindset about how much we drive the car. And this was about limiting access to the car and prioritising to pedestrians and non-vehicle users. And in addition, obviously, as I've said, we're also trialling again a mindset initiative, the Hopper Bus set up in St Helier, which should be, if it hasn't started, should be about to. In terms of, for me, housing, it's about increasing the supply. Absolute priority has got to be on brownfield sites. And if we can increase the speed and decrease the cost of construction, which is through modern methods, that should help solve the problem in the longer term.
Thank you for your double-edged question. It's marine protected areas are going to happen. We pass them through the island plan. It's a really important innovation that we've gone through. For me, some work that I've already been doing, and I want to continue, and whoever's in the post, I really want them to continue. The most important thing we can do to maintain Jersey's current landscape is supporting farming. That's not a natural landscape, that's a farmed landscape, but it's the landscape that we all enjoy and that we all know. Farming, the support for that collapsed through the 2000s up till now. We've doubled that. I believe it needs to double again, and I've already put in an increase for the next government plan of another £1 million, which would be a 33% increase in that. So I think supporting farming is one of the key ways we maintain the landscape that we love in Jersey. We need a property register, which we've passed but hasn't been brought in yet. Then we can start looking at empty homes, and can we encourage people, taxing those which are empty but should be in use, to bring them back in. That will immediately enhance housing stock and help bring down the prices.
I'll answer the second one first. Basically, the solution is to build more and build cheaper. So building more, we've started, and we've seriously looked at building cheaper. There are lots of new solutions like prefab, where actually you can have a whole house made in Poland and brought to Jersey, put on the ground. The cost is very, very small. It's really remarkable. So again, if we target those to the right people, this would make housing much more affordable without damaging the rest of the market. In terms of the natural environment, there are so many things that we tried to do and that we actually failed to do properly. And one thing that I'd like to come back to do, one of the things that I'm really upset about, is tree protection. I really want trees to be properly protected. We are the last place in Europe when they are not. The other thing I'd like to do is to give a legal grounding to the national park, both land and sea. It is not something that it has now.
Thank you. I spent most of my life trying to do what you've just said. 25 years in a building society we were trying to get to affordable housing. And the other one that always used to grab me was, what does affordable housing mean? Here I am 25 years later, arrived in Trinity, and guess what? They're talking about affordable housing. There are many ways of doing it, but there is no structured way of doing it. If somebody had come up with it when they came out of the war in 1945, because with the prefabs, that was the ideal way going forward, but that didn't work. We've really got to look at it. And just your one quick question on the environment. There's 120,000 registered cars on the island.
15.
I think that we really do need to look at the registration of the number of cars on the island, and I really do think if you're going to keep a car, fine, but let's leave it in the garage. Thank you.
Yet again, I find myself agreeing with Kirsten because my answer was also to support farming. Farmers are the guardians of the environment. The Jersey is beautiful. Survey after survey says people value our green environment, our natural environment. Farmers look after that. They look after the fields, the hedgerows. They do the broncage. They maintain the land, and that is why it looks so beautiful. Inflation in farming is running at 30% at the moment. Food inflation, that's fertiliser, fuel, feed. Food inflation is 8%. That means farmers are bearing a huge amount of cost that they're not being reimbursed. It's not economic. We have to help them continue to operate by finding outlets for the food. I also don't think we should be building on greenfield sites except as a very last resort. Very quickly on housing, I'd like to look at all the empty buildings we have that are offices. I'm sure we've got lots of empty office building as well. Everybody's very focused on empty houses, but we need to look at empty office space and bring that into use as well.
I would like to see the marine park environment extended as quickly as it can be, as well as the national park along the north coast. I know this conflicts with farming. I think that farmers should be encouraged to invest in regenerative agriculture. I think there should be a bus service from the east to the west of the island along the north coast, which would encourage us to get out of our cars. As far as cheaper housing is concerned, if we knew the answer to that, that would be the magic bullet. It has a lot to do with finance, and at this particular moment, mortgages are going up. I don't see that there is much future for reducing the cost of housing in the island.
15.
I think it would be very sad to say that when more people leave the island, more houses will come up for sale, and there will be a sort of regulative mechanism at that point. But this is not the right answer.
So to improve the natural beauty, I think we're really lucky. I'm a tenant of Jardin d'Olivet in Trinity, and we've been really trying to protect that and keep it as a heathland and to maintain that area. And I think there are other areas in Jersey that other people probably look after as well, but we've been looking after it for 40 years, and we're trying to continue doing that. And I would also support the farmers, because I think that's so important that and there's some really lovely young farmers who are doing regenerative farming in Trinity, and I think I really support them. And as for housing, I think we have to carry on with the parish sheltered schemes as much as possible, whereby parishes helping all of the community, from young people to the elderly, to have homes so that to reduce costs. So I think that all helps. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. Lady on just the back. Chris, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Harm Stentiford. I come from Trinity. And I would like to ask you whether you have made any movements to your colleagues to form a coalition in one way or the other, or to be prepared to form a government together.
John. The poison bullet. The poison bullet question.
I'll start. Mr. Stenford, any group, alliance, party, individuals, whatever it is, are going to have to form a coalition to form a government. That's absolutely clearly the case. If you like, that's what I did 4 years ago. I'm still, despite some of the negativity that's out there, I'm proud of our achievements as a whole. And as I said, including dealing with the pandemic and Brexit and all the other challenges we've had thrown at us. But so the short answer is yes, whoever is elected to the Assembly is going to have to be prepared to work and form a coalition with other colleagues You have a pool of 49 people, not 48, by the way, and that is who you work with for the next 4 years.
15.
Yes, and with whom? You didn't answer.
Oh, sorry, no, whoops, I didn't hear that bit. Basically, it's going to be, from my perspective, it will be people who are like-minded and that we can work with. I can't give you a definitive group. We've got to see who's in the actual assembly at the time.
Thank you. All my life, Jersey's had coalition governments. That's what Jersey does. And that's what will continue. There's no question. Who will entirely depend on who is best placed to form a coalition of people who are working together, happily working together to support each other to take the island forward. The ministerial system we have is excessively divisive. It needs to be changed. And I believe we need to have people, 48, 49 people working together. So at the moment, people on scrutiny, and they're the majority in the Assembly, are left out from so much of the decision making. It's such a waste of talent and a waste of ability. That needs to change, and I really want to help bring that change. You can still have a key minister as the head of the committee,
15.
the ministerial committee, but you need to have 3 or 4 or 5 people around them. Because I've had ministers say to me this, they're there on their own, faced by 6 or 7 civil servants. They need to be supported by more people in that kind of committee structure. So I think we need to go back there, and a coalition is guaranteed.
Yes, of course. And we need to see who's left standing, which is a first step. But to be fair, among the, I think, 93 candidates that we've seen, there are plenty of very, very good people, both new and old. And I don't think the new government will have any problem finding, finding a group within those people to form itself. So I don't see this as a problem. And everybody, whoever is elected, will have exactly the same issues, and they will be as easy to resolve.
Hugh?
Yes, sorry. Well, obviously, I've had experience in the UK, but as I said, I put that aside because I don't really think at the present time that Jersey has, I'm going to say, the ability to get people together to come under the same roof. I've been in there 4 years like Kirsten, and I think both of us would like to have known what we know now when we started 4 years ago. And I think that our views would have been vastly different. Sorry, Kirsten, I'm assuming, but I just feel that there has to be people with like-minded minds pulling together, not working for themselves, but working for the island, for the parishes, and keeping things that we have that we don't necessarily have to get rid of. When I start hearing we're going to get rid of the constables, or
15.
we're not going to we're not going to have the honorary police. When I hear things like that, if it's not broken, why get involved in it? They do a tremendous job. We've got to keep that. And then the running of the island comes down to the people that are elected from the parishes, and they must all work together.
In answer to the first part of your question, no, I haven't had any discussions with anyone about whether I will support them as Chief Minister in return for any particular position in government. I think we all have that word, if elected, hanging over our heads, so I think it would be far too premature to have those discussions. Like most of the panel, I do think the Chief Minister has to be the person who's best suited for the job. One of the reasons I chose not to join a party was because I felt quite uncomfortable with the idea being promoted by some parties that if they get in, Mr A or Mr B or Miss C, let's say there's a Miss C around, would be Chief Minister. I think it has to be the person who can command the House, who can bring together a council of ministers in whatever form that takes. And we really, really do need people who will just work together, be able to compromise, who will be able to find solutions that work for Jersey and drive forward to get the best solutions for Jersey and to resolve the hospital, housing. Those are critical. Thank you.
I'm wondering how alliance and reform are going to work together. I am not in favour of party politics. I think that in an assembly, a small assembly in a small island, this is going to be extremely divisive. And I'd just like you to look at this table here. There are 3 people who belong to one party and the rest of us are independents. I wonder why. I was asked to join a party quite early on, and I decided against it because I wanted to retain my independence. I think that's probably one of the worst ideas that has hit Jersey politics in a very, very long time. And I'm sorry that we're going to all have to try and work together somehow in the new assembly. Otherwise, we will not get anything achieved at all.
I'm standing as an independent because I think it's really important that I'm independent, but I want to work collaboratively with anybody and all of the 49 people who are in the States, because that's the only way we're going to be able to go forward. And we have to work together to make good solutions for everyone on Jersey. And I think that will have to be the way forward because it's so important. I think making decisions before you're even elected is not a good idea. You have to wait and see who is elected, and then we can decide who's going to be the best, who we think is going to be the best person to be Chief Minister, and then we all need to work together. And I'd rather have more people in committees. Rather, I think in the past, too few ministers have been making decisions, and it hasn't been an inclusive States Assembly, and I think there have been lots of divisions which haven't been good, lots of pettiness.
Hilary.
On answering your first question, I have not been approached to form any coalition or also to be approached on support of our Chief Minister. I find also that is been really difficult, the grandstanding of political parties to say, oh, I want to be Chief Minister, yet they have not come to talk to me about, you know, their vision and actually do kind of hustings like you're doing for us. But we also need to understand what leadership will look like under the different Chief Ministers proposed. And I want to have them come to really tell me what how they feel their vision is on being a good leader in Jersey. And also their team, because that is, again, the coalition. And I hear, oh, yes, it needs to be like-minded. But we are all inclusive. We're a diverse society. And so I don't think in such a small society we should just be like-minded. We need to work in consensus. We need to be working collaboratively together for the better of Jersey, not just one group because they're like-minded. That's really important.
Okay, everybody, we've run out of time now, I'm afraid. It's always sad because we're just getting into the nitty-gritty of it. But nothing remains now except for me to thank all of our candidates for their participation in these hustings. The standard of their discussion and participation, I think, will challenge the electors now to make the right choices. And you've got my full sympathy with that. I'd also like to thank the parishioners for coming along, all of the parishioners, to listen and participate in this meeting, without whom there would be no point in carrying on. Finally, but not least, I'd like to thank Jane, who's now iPhone blind and deaf. And all of the parish officials who've worked really hard, to set all of this up, because this has actually been some weeks in the making, and for the support for me here this afternoon. And with that, I'd like to thank you all and wish you all the best.